Marcus had been looking forward to this weekend for months. After 15 years of government service, he'd finally saved enough to buy his dream property on modest lakefront cabin. Nestled in the pines of Clearwater Lake, the realtor had mentioned it was part of a small homeowners association. But Marcus figured that just meant keeping the grass trimmed and the dock maintained. He couldn't have been more wrong. The first sign of trouble came before he'd even finished unloading his truck. A middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a yellow windbreaker marched across his newly acquired property like she owned it. Behind her trailed a lanky teenager with a kind of smirk that suggested he'd never heard the word consequences. "Excuse me," the woman called out, her voice carrying a particular tone reserved for restaurant managers and customer service representatives. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Clearwater Lake Homeowners Association. I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Marcus set down the box he was carrying and extended his hand with a friendly smile. "Marcus Thompson, just bought the place last week. Beautiful area you got here." Karen's handshake was brief and cold. Her eyes swept over Marcus with the efficiency of a security scanner, taking in his casual jeans, his moving truck, and most notably, his face. "Yes, well, we'll need to discuss the association guidelines. They are certain standards we maintain here at Clearwater Lake." The teenager behind her snickered. "Mom, maybe he doesn't know how things work around here yet." "That's exactly why we're here, Brandon," Karen replied, her smile never wavering but never reaching her eyes. "Mr. Thompson, I assume you received the HOA packet from your realtor." Marcus nodded. "I did. Seemed pretty standard. No loud music. After 10. Keep the property clean. That sort of thing, though. It's much more comprehensive than that." Karen produced a thick folder from seemingly nowhere. "Annual dues are $1,500, paid in full by January 1st. No modifications to your property without written approval from the board. No guests staying longer than 3 consecutive days without prior notification, and absolutely no commercial vehicles parked overnight." She gestured toward his pickup truck, which bore the subtle insignia of his former employer. "That includes government vehicles." Marcus felt his friendly demeanor cooling slightly. "It's my personal truck. I bought it when I left my last job. Regardless, it has government plates. That's not the image we cultivate here." Karen's voice had taken on the patient tone one might use with a slow child. "I'm sure you understand. Property values and all that." Brandon stepped forward, emboldened by his mother's obvious displeasure. "Yeah, plus we've got kids who swim in this lake. We need to make sure it stays safe." The way he said safe made Marcus's jaw tighten slightly, but he kept his voice level. "I appreciate your concern for the neighborhood. I'm looking forward to being a good neighbor." "I certainly hope so," Karen replied. "Now, about your dock access. The previous owner, Mr. Henderson, rarely used his privileges. We've grown accustomed to that dock space remaining available for other residents." "Available how?" Marcus asked. "Well, my Brandon here is an excellent swimmer, practically lives in the water during summer. It would be such a shame if his access to that side of the lake were suddenly restricted." Marcus looked at the dock that had been specifically mentioned in his property deed, then back at Karen's expectant face. "I see. And if I wanted to use my own dock?" Karen's smile became razor thin. "Well, that's certainly your legal right. Though I should mention that the HOA board reviews all property compliance issues very thoroughly. Very thoroughly indeed. We find that new residents sometimes need time to adjust to our community standards." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus had dealt with enough bureaucrats and politicians to recognize a shakedown when he heard one. What would you have done in his position? Cave to the pressure for the sake of peace, or stand your ground and risk making enemies on day one? I appreciate you stopping by, Marcus said carefully. I'll be sure to review all the whole materials thoroughly. See that you do. Karen turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Thompson, welcome to Clearwater Lake. I do hope you'll fit in. As they walked away, Marcus heard Brandon mutter something that sounded suspiciously like doubt, followed by his mother's hushed but sharp Brandon, not here. Marcus stood in his driveway, watching them disappear around the bend. He bought this place for peace and quiet, but something told him that Karen Whitfield had very different plans for his summer. 3 weeks into his Clearwater Lake residency, Marcus thought he'd found a workable rhythm. He used his dock early in the morning for fishing, kept his property immaculate, and nodded politely to neighbors during his evening walks. It wasn't exactly the peaceful retreat he'd envisioned, but it was manageable. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. Marcus was enjoying his morning coffee on the dock when he heard voices from the water. Brandon Whitfield and 2 of his friends were swimming near the shoreline, their conversation carrying clearly across the calm lake surface. I'm telling you, he doesn't belong here, Brandon was saying to a red-haired kid Marcus had seen around the neighborhood. My mom says people like him bring down property values just by existing. Dude, that's harsh, the red-haired kid replied, though he was grinning. What's your mom gonna do about it? She's working on it. Says there's always something in the whole rules that can fix problems like this. Brandon's voice carried that same entitled confidence Marcus had noticed during their first meeting. Besides, he won't last long anyway. They never do in neighborhoods like this. The third kid, a smaller boy who seemed uncomfortable with the conversation, spoke up. Maybe we should just leave him alone. He seems nice enough. Brandon's response was swift and cruel. Nice? Tommy, you're such a wimp. My mom says being nice to the wrong people is how good neighborhoods go to hell. Marcus set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. He'd heard enough racist dog whistles in his career to recognize them, even wrapped in the polite language of property values and neighborhood character. But what came next crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Besides, Brandon continued, his voice growing bolder. What's he gonna do about it? Call the cops? Half of them probably think the same thing we do. That's when Marcus made his decision. He stood up, his movement causing the dock to creak slightly. The sound carried across the water, and all 3 boys looked in his direction. Morning, gentlemen, Marcus called out, his voice perfectly pleasant. Beautiful day for a swim. Brandon's face flushed, but his arrogance quickly reasserted itself. Yeah, it is. Nice private lake we've got here. Really exclusive. Indeed it is. Marcus agreed. Which reminds me, Brandon, I'll need you and your friends to swim on your family side of the lake from now on. What? Brandon's voice cracked slightly. You can't tell us where to swim. This is a community lake. Marcus pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his photos until he found what he was looking for. A detailed survey map of his property. Actually, according to my deed and this survey, the water rights extend 20 feet out from my shoreline. You're currently trespassing. The red-haired kid immediately began swimming toward shore, but Brandon held his ground. My mom's not gonna like this. Your mom's opinions don't change property law, Marcus replied calmly. I'm asking nicely. Don't make me ask again. You can't keep us out of a public lake. It's not a public lake, son. It's a private community lake, and you're in my section of it. Marcus's voice remained level. But there was steel underneath now. Move along. Tommy had already reached the shore and was grabbing his towel, clearly eager to avoid confrontation. The red-haired kid followed suit, but Brandon floated there for another long moment, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I certainly hope it is," Marcus replied, "for everyone's sake." As the boys gathered their things and left, Marcus could hear Brandon's angry muttering about people who don't know their place and promises that his mother would fix this situation. Marcus finished his coffee in peace, but he wasn't naive. He'd drawn a line in the sand, and he knew Karen Whitfield well enough by now to know she wouldn't let it stand. The question wasn't whether she'd retaliate, but how creative her revenge would be. He didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 hours later, his doorbell rang. Through the window, he could see Karen standing on his porch with a clipboard and the kind of smile that promised trouble. "Mr. Thompson," she said when he opened the door, "I hope you don't mind, but I'm conducting a routine HOA compliance inspection, just making sure everything meets our community standards." Marcus stepped back to let her in, curious to see what angle she'd take. "Of course. What specifically are you looking for?" "Oh, just general things. Fire safety, structural modifications, proper permits for any work you've done." Her eyes swept his living room with predatory precision. "My, you certainly have made yourself comfortable quickly." She paused at his bookshelf, her gaze lingering on his collection of government manuals and policy books. "Quite an extensive library, very specialized." "I like to stay informed," Marcus said simply. Karen made several notes on her clipboard, her pen scratching with dramatic flourish. "I see you've installed new locks on your doors. Standard security upgrade. The previous owner's keys were distributed pretty widely, according to my realtor. More scribbling, and these smoke detectors look different from the standard models. They're newer and more sensitive. Better safe than sorry, MMHMM. Karen's smile grew sharper. "Well, I'll need to verify that all these modifications were properly approved by the HOA board. Any work done without prior written consent is subject to fines and removal orders." Marcus felt his patience wearing thin. "I'm pretty sure replacing smoke detectors doesn't require HOA approval." "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Article 15. Subsection 3 of our covenants clearly states that any modifications to the electrical or safety systems require board approval." She held up a thick booklet Marcus had never seen before. "Updated regulations. Passed just last month." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Rules passed after he'd bought the property, retroactively applied to work he'd done in good faith. What would you have done? Challenge obvious harassment in court, knowing it would cost thousands in legal fees? Or let her win this round and hope she'd be satisfied? "I'll need you to submit all proper paperwork within 48 hours, Karen continued, "or face immediate fines of $500 per violation." As she prepared to leave, her parting shot was delivered with surgical precision. "Oh, and Mr. Thompson, I do hope you'll reconsider your territorial approach to the lake. Community harmony is so important here at Clearwater. It would be such a shame if someone felt unwelcome." Marcus spent the next 2 days researching HOA law and preparing his paperwork, but he could feel the walls closing in. Karen had been busy. Suddenly, his morning fishing was interrupted by complaints about excessive noise from neighbors who'd previously been friendly. His mail delivery was delayed due to concerns about his mailbox placement that required HOA review. Even his garbage pickup was questioned because his bins allegedly didn't meet community aesthetic standards. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and Marcus knew it. But what truly shocked him was discovering that several neighbors were actively participating in the harassment. People who waved and smiled during his first weeks were now filing complaints and avoiding eye contact. The breaking point came on a humid Thursday evening. Marcus was grilling dinner on his deck when he heard raised voices from the lake. Through the trees, he could see Brandon and his friends at the water's edge, but this time they weren't alone. Karen was there, along with two other adults Marcus recognized as HOA board members. "I'm telling you, Mom, he threatened us," Brandon was saying, his voice carrying the practiced whine of a teenager who knew exactly which buttons to push. "He said we weren't allowed in the water anymore, and when I told him it was a community lake, he got really aggressive." "Aggressive how?" asked one of the board members, a thin man with glasses who lived 3 houses down from Marcus. He was yelling and waving his arms around. Tommy was scared. "Weren't you, Tommy?" The smaller boy shifted uncomfortably, but nodded. "Yeah." He seemed really angry. Marcus set down his grilling tongs and walked to the edge of his property, where he could hear more clearly. What he heard next made his blood run cold. "The thing is," Karen was explaining to the board members, "we have to consider the safety of our children. This kind of territorial behavior, combined with his obvious hostility toward our community values, creates a genuinely dangerous situation." "What are you suggesting?" The other board member, a woman Marcus had never spoken to, asked quietly. "I think it's time we explored our options for removing problem residents. The safety of our families has to come first." Marcus had heard enough. He walked over to the group, noting how they all tensed as he approached. "Evening, folks. I couldn't help but overhear you discussing me." Karen's composure didn't slip an inch. "Mr. Thompson, we were just discussing the incident from earlier this week." "You mean when I asked your son to respect my property rights?" "You mean when you threatened our children?" Karen shot back, her voice rising. "Brandon, tell Mr. Thompson exactly what you told us." Brandon launched into an elaborate story that bore little resemblance to reality. According to his version, Marcus had stormed out onto his dock screaming racial slurs and threatening to call immigration on anyone who didn't leave immediately. The other boys nodded along, though Tommy looked increasingly uncomfortable. "That's interesting," Marcus said calmly, "because I have security cameras that recorded the entire interaction." The group fell silent. Karen's perfect smile flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Security cameras? I don't recall those being approved by the Architectural Review Committee. They're on my property, pointed at my property. No approval needed." "I think you'll find that's incorrect," the thin man with glasses spoke up. "Any surveillance equipment requires prior approval to ensure it doesn't violate other residents' privacy." Another trap, Marcus realized. Another retroactive rule designed to eliminate evidence of their harassment. But what came next surprised even him. "You know what?" Karen said, pulling out her phone. "I think this situation has escalated beyond what our HOA can handle internally. We have a resident who's installed unauthorized surveillance equipment, who's threatening children, and who clearly has no intention of following our community guidelines." She began dialing. "I'm calling the police. Let them sort out whether Mr. Thompson's behavior constitutes a threat to our neighborhood." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. He'd seen this playbook before: weaponized law enforcement against someone you can't control through normal channels. In his experience, these situations could go very wrong very quickly, especially for someone who looked like him. "Ma'am, I don't think that's necessary," he said, keeping his voice as calm and non-threatening as possible. "We can work this out." "Oh, I think it's very necessary," Karen replied. Her phone already connected. Yes. Hello? I need to report a threatening resident in our neighborhood, Clearwater Lake HOA. He's been harassing our children and has installed unauthorized surveillance equipment. As she spoke to the dispatcher, Marcus caught Tommy staring at him with obvious guilt. The boy started to say something, but Brandon quickly elbowed him into silence. Marcus stood there listening to Karen paint him as an unstable threat to community safety, knowing that in about 15 minutes, his peaceful evening would become something very different. What would you have done in that moment? Run back inside and hope for the best? Stay and try to explain to officers who'd already heard one side of the story? Or trust that the truth would somehow be enough? As Karen finished her call, she looked directly at Marcus with the satisfied expression of someone who just played their ace. The deputy will be here shortly, Mr. Thompson. I do hope you'll cooperate fully with their investigation. Marcus nodded slowly, already calculating his next moves. But as he watched Karen's triumphant smile, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to learn something about him that would make her regret this particular phone call. The sheriff's cruiser arrived exactly 14 minutes after Karen's call, its red and blue lights cutting through the evening dusk like a knife. Marcus remained on his deck, hands visible, as the deputy stepped out of the vehicle. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s with graying temples and the kind of measured movements that suggested years of experience. Karen immediately rushed over to greet him, her voice pitched perfectly to convey concerned neighbor rather than vindictive. Troublemaker. Deputy Harrison, thank you so much for coming. I'm Karen Whitfield, HOA president. We have a very concerning situation with one of our residents. Deputy Harrison nodded politely, but his eyes were already scanning the scene, taking in the assembled group and Marcus standing calmly on his deck. Ma'am, I'll need to speak with everyone involved. Let me start with the complainant. As Karen launched into her carefully rehearsed story about threats, surveillance equipment, and aggressive behavior, Marcus noticed something interesting. Deputy Harrison was listening, but his body language remained neutral, no rushing to judgments, no immediate focus on Marcus as the obvious problem. Professional skepticism, and he's been completely uncooperative with our HOA guidelines, Karen was concluding. Installing unauthorized equipment, claiming ownership of community lake access, threatening our children when they try to use facilities they've always had access to. I see, Deputy Harrison said, making notes in a small notebook. And where's the resident in question? Right there. Karen pointed dramatically at Marcus. Mr. Thompson. Deputy Harrison looked up at the deck where Marcus stood waiting. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Then something remarkable happened. Deputy Harrison's professional mask slipped slightly, replaced by what looked suspiciously like recognition. Mr. Thompson, he called out, would you mind coming down here so we can talk? Marcus descended from his deck slowly, hands still visible, and approached the group. As he got closer, Deputy Harrison's expression continued to evolve from professional neutrality to something approaching disbelief. Marcus Thompson, the deputy asked, his voice carrying a note Marcus couldn't quite identify. That's right, officer. Deputy. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. Then he did something that clearly surprised everyone present. He smiled, not the polite, professional smile of a law enforcement officer managing a situation, but the genuine grin of someone unexpectedly encountering an old friend. I'll be damned, he said softly. Marcus Thompson. Karen's confident expression began to waver slightly. Deputy Harrison, do you know this man? Know him? Deputy Harrison laughed. the sound carrying genuine warmth. "Ma'am, this is Agent Marcus Thompson, 15-year veteran of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Retired last month after a commendation ceremony attended by the director himself." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus watched the color drain from Karen's face as the implications hit her. Brandon looked confused, glancing between his mother and the deputy with growing concern. "Agent Thompson," Deputy Harrison continued, his voice now carrying obvious respect. "What brings you to our little corner of the world?" "Just trying to enjoy a quiet retirement, Deputy," Marcus replied, his tone mild, but his eyes never leaving. Karen's face. "Bought the old Henderson place. Thought it would be peaceful." "I see." Deputy Harrison turned back to the group, his professional demeanor returning, but now carrying a distinct chill. "And you folks have been having problems with Agent Thompson." Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. We didn't know. I mean, his background doesn't change the fact that he's been uncooperative with our community guidelines." "Community guidelines," Deputy Harrison repeated slowly, "such as unauthorized surveillance equipment, threats against children, territorial behavior regarding lake access." Karen's voice grew weaker with each accusation. "Agent Thompson," Deputy Harrison said, "you mentioned surveillance equipment. Mind if I ask what kind?" "Standard home security system. Motion-activated cameras covering my property lines and dock area. All footage stored locally. None of it capturing neighboring properties. Perfectly legal on your own property," the deputy confirmed. "And these threats against children?" Marcus gestured toward Brandon. "I asked this young man and his friends to respect my property boundaries when they were swimming in the water rights section that came with my deed. No threats, no raised voices, just a polite request to swim elsewhere." Deputy Harrison looked at Brandon, who was now shifting uncomfortably under official scrutiny. "Son, is that how you remember it?" Brandon glanced at his mother, clearly looking for guidance that wasn't coming. Karen stood frozen, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling in real time. It was Tommy who finally spoke up. That's basically what happened," he said quietly. "Mr. Thompson was polite. He just asked us to swim somewhere else." "Tommy," Brandon hissed, but the smaller boy had found his courage. "I'm sorry, Brandon, but he wasn't mean or anything. And some of the stuff we were saying," Tommy looked directly at Marcus, "some of the stuff we were saying was really awful. I'm sorry." Deputy Harrison nodded slowly, making more notes. "And this territorial behavior regarding lake access?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed the deputy his property survey. "Water rights extend 20 feet from my shoreline, according to my deed. I was simply enforcing my legal property rights, which you have every right to do," the deputy confirmed. He looked back at Karen, whose entitled confidence had evaporated completely. "Mom, from what I'm hearing, Agent Thompson has done nothing wrong. In fact, it sounds like he's been remarkably patient with harassment that might have driven other people that filed their own complaints." "Harassment?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "Selective enforcement of HOA rules, retroactive policy changes, designed to target a specific resident, false complaints to law enforcement." Deputy Harrison's tone was all business now. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Whitfield, the kind that could result in civil rights violations if a pattern could be established." The whole board members who'd been so eager to support Karen minutes earlier were now backing away, both physically and politically. The thin man with glasses was studying his shoes with intense fascination. "Now," Deputy Harrison continued, "I'm going to make a suggestion. Agent Thompson seems like a reasonable man who just wants to enjoy his retirement in peace. What would you folks say to leaving him alone to do exactly that? Karen nodded rapidly, her earlier bravado completely gone. Of course, absolutely, we just want everyone to be comfortable in our community. Excellent. The deputy closed his notebook. Agent Thompson, I don't expect we'll be hearing any more complaints about you, will we? I certainly hope not. Deputy, as the group began to disperse, Tommy approached Marcus hesitantly. Mr. Thompson, I really am sorry about the things we said. My dad always tells me I should stand up when people say mean stuff, but I was scared. Marcus smiled at the boy, the first genuine smile he'd felt in weeks. Takes courage to do the right thing, son, especially when it's hard. You did good tonight. After everyone else had left, Deputy Harrison lingered for a moment. Agent Thompson, I want you to know that most folks around here are good people. Don't let a few bad apples spoil the whole neighborhood for you. I appreciate that, Deputy. And thank you for handling this professionally. Just doing my job. Though I have to ask 15 years in Civil Rights Division and you retired to deal with HOA Karen. Seems like going from the frying pan into the fire. Marcus laughed, the sound carrying across the now peaceful lake. You know, Deputy, after 15 years of fighting institutional racism and systemic discrimination, I thought a small town HOA would be a nice, quiet change of pace. And now, Marcus looked out at his lake, his dock, his dream retirement home, that he'd almost lost to the pettiness and prejudice of people who thought they knew what he deserved based on the color of his skin. Now I think I chose the perfect place to finish what I started. What would you have done in Marcus's situation? Would you have fought back from the beginning, or tried to keep the peace like he did? Sometimes the quiet battles we fight in our own neighborhoods are just as important as the big ones that make headlines, and sometimes the people who think they have all the power are about to learn that respect can't be legislated away, but it can definitely be earned. If you're still here, I'd really like to know what this reminded you of or what you would have done in my place. And hey, if this story hits something in you and you want to support the channel, that little thanks button's always there. Thanks for hanging out. We're HOA Confessional Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.